Welcome back to This Week in Privacy, our weekly series where we discuss the latest updates with what we're working on within the Privacy Guides community and this week's top stories in the data privacy and cybersecurity space, including Apple adding or expanding, I should say, age verification tools in iOS, Amazon doxing public wish lists, and people pushing back on flock surveillance. I'm Nate, and with me this week is Jonah. Welcome back. It's been a while.
I know it's been a few weeks, but it is good to be back with you doing this.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. Privacy Guides, for those who don't know, is a nonprofit which researches and shares privacy related information and facilitates a community on our forum and matrix where people can ask questions and get advice about staying private online and preserving their digital rights. With that, we're going to launch into the biggest news in privacy and security from the past week. And our main story this week is about Apple. As I said, so Apple, this headline comes from TechCrunch. It says Apple rolls out age verification tools worldwide to comply with growing web of child safety laws. So personally, I feel like the headline says most of it. But the main thing, I guess, is specifically what tools is Apple rolling out. And it looks like there's two main changes, at least according to this article. So the first one is that in certain countries, Apple will block the download of apps rated 18 and up in by default, and that is Brazil, Australia, and Singapore. And you will have to verify. I believe you have to verify ID for that one. But they are also rolling out something that I believe they mentioned last year called the Declared Age Range API. So this is in response to here in the US, I think it started in Texas, and I think there's like a national version that is unfortunately still being discussed. Texas wanted to do what was called the the App Store Accountability Act, which would require Google and Apple to verify somebody's age, and then they would pass that on to the apps. So if somebody wanted to download I don't know. Does Pornhub even have an app? But something not age appropriate. If they wanted to download an app like that, the idea is that instead of having all these different websites that may or may not comply with this and having they have to have all these different providers, let's just make Apple and Google do it. And Apple and Google were vehemently opposed to that, which I have opinions that we can talk about that in a minute. And but anyways, that law was eventually paused. The Texas version, again, the national one, as far as I know, is still being discussed here in the US. But Apple went ahead and built in this capability where developers can get, I don't know why it's an age range and not an actual age, but the idea is that developers don't get any more personal information than they need to. And so all they get is like, is the user of age to download this app? And that's why I say, I don't know why they get an age or even just a yes or no. I don't know why it has to be like, oh, they're between 13 and 16 or whatever it is. That's kind of interesting. But yeah, so Apple is basically, I mean, like the headline says, there's so much push for age verification going on around the world that Apple is just trying to get ahead of this and comply as best they can, I guess, in advance and be ready for it when it unfortunately becomes law in a lot of places. I feel like there was something else I wanted to add to that, but it's kind of escaping me at the moment. Jonah, do you have any thoughts about this one?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's not clear to me if this is being rolled out in all countries necessarily. I know the headline is worldwide, and it's certainly being rolled out in countries around the world. So that makes sense. But I know it's being rolled out in Brazil and in Australia, Singapore, Brazil, as you mentioned, and then in some U.S. states. The interesting thing is that this declared age range API will work differently in different regions. So, uh, depending on where you are, I think in most places, if an app is requesting your age for whatever reason, there's going to be a consent screen that pops up, basically telling you like this information is being shared with the app. According to Apple, in some regions with more regulation, the system is going to automatically provide the person's age range. You can't decline sharing. So I don't know. I think it applied to one of these countries. If I'm looking at uh, their announcement, it looks like the app downloads in Australia, Singapore, and Brazil, I believe, are going to be performed automatically. for App Store downloads, and then also apps can independently request your age through this API. Um, they don't say in the announcement that I saw, unless you saw something else. I know you mentioned they were doing ID scans. The announcement that I saw from Apple just said that they were confirming to be adults through quote reasonable methods, whatever that means. And it also says that the age range API is going to provide the method of age verification that's actually used to the app. So the app can, I guess, decide based on however Apple verifies your age, whether that verification process is robust enough or not. If it's something that the app chooses not to trust, I'm not sure exactly how that would be handled. But yeah, a lot of strange implementation stuff. I guess it's better than like your date of birth being shared with the apps because that's obviously sensitive information that's used for all sorts of verification stuff beyond age that you probably wouldn't want shared with most apps. But uh, yeah, it's not great, and especially not great that it's going to be automatic in some regions. Because to your point, like Apple doesn't even allow pornographic apps like Pornhub, for example, on the App Store in the first place. It's against the terms of service. And of course, there is this content in like mainstream apps like Twitter or Reddit, which are usually already locked behind some age verification paywall on the site side. Um, but yeah, I'm not sure exactly what apps are going to be affected by these changes in what country. So that would be
Well, I was just gonna say it's funny you mentioned that because that was kind of my thought when I was reading this story. I was like, man, what? Like, how are apps even? I don't know. I just had that like cynical thought where I'm just like, what does this even affect? And so I went and looked on the App Store,
Mhm.
and I just scrolled through like the top free apps, and as far as I can tell, there's like no rhyme or reason to how apps are rated, because the vast majority of them require you to be either 13 or 16. But then like Gmail, Lyft, I specifically wrote these down. Gmail, Lyft, and Rocket Mortgage are rated 4 and up. And I really want to meet the 5-year-old who's using Rocket Mortgage.
As far as I know,
Chrome,
most of that is gonna be, like, self-attested by the developer, right? Similar to, like, the privacy
yeah.
sheet where you can just kinda make up whatever you want. I know in the announcement for this age verification stuff, in Apple's post, they said that in Brazil, if you identify your app as containing loot boxes through the age rating questionnaire, then the age rating of your app in Brazil will be updated to 18 plus and only in that country. That's the only explicit mention of what would be actually affected in this announcement, but I'm sure there's other apps as well.
Yeah, right there. Yeah, I saw that too. I thought that was kind of funny. Yeah, the last one I wanted to point out real quick though, Google Chrome is rated 16 and up, which I think is interesting because you can obviously use Chrome to access not safe for work materials. So
Yes.
yeah, it like you said, it just seems to be so like self-reported, which makes me wonder the efficacy of this. Um, yeah, just to clarify, I don't actually know if IDs are going to be required. We've had a few people chime in the chat here, like Jordan said that they are in Australia, and they're not able to select age sharing on iOS 26.3. Um, somebody else here said that some proposals have been credit cards. I think you're right. I think a lot of these laws avoid specifically naming how they have to do age verification. And that's for a variety of reasons. One of which is like future proofing. They kind of don't want to write a law that says right now you have to do it like by, I don't know, ID scanning. And then if for some reason that becomes illegal or problematic, now they have to go through the whole legal process all over again. So yeah, it's kind of up to companies, I guess. But it is it's definitely, yeah, like I don't know. It's just I guess the reason I assumed there would be some kind of ID scanning in those countries is because I know that like Australia, for example, does already have requirements to age gate social media and keep children off social media. So I get the feeling that that one's probably going to be a little bit more strict than some of these other countries and places, but I could be wrong about that. That's kind of me guessing, to be totally honest. So um
It's yeah, it's unclear. I don't know if Apple's gonna be doing, like, automatic stuff through the App Store. I'm guessing credit card stuff, credit card verification would be a factor, at least in some places that would make sense. If I'm looking at Apple's like developer documentation about this, the main thing that they always mention is either just like the date of birth that you register with your Apple ID, or if you are in like an Apple family, and especially like if you're or for your children who you make an Apple account for to add to your family, it'll be on the parents to decide whether to share their age with these apps or not. Um, which seems like sort of a self-verification system, but I'm sure there are other verification options in other countries. I'm not exactly sure what they are though, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I that was one of the things I forgot to mention is it does seem to be, from what I can tell, kind of, at least in countries where ID is not yet required, it does seem to be like whatever age you put into Apple, they're not really going to verify it, kind of thing, unless they have a reason to. But yeah, it's I like here in the comments, Jordan said, I wonder if they're going to put restrictions on Safari browsing because of the comment I made about Chrome.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, it doesn't seem like it'll be that effective because your iPhone already comes with this web browser out of the box, right? So you don't even need to log into the App Store at all to access pretty much any content you would like on an iPhone. So what is the
Well,
point?
I do have to wonder though, because doesn't Safari have built in, like, you can put the parental, and I mean, to be fair, like, this is one of the arguments that a lot of privacy advocates are rightfully so getting frustrated in, is like, we don't need age verification laws because all of these operating systems, at least the mainstream ones like iOS and Windows and Mac, they all come with built-in parental controls. I don't know about Windows now that I say that out loud, but iPhones and Androids do come with built-in parental controls. So like, why are we like, why can't we just do better about teaching parents that those are there and how to use them? So I actually don't know how that would work on Safari though. How can you tell Safari? Sorry, now I'm just thinking about that. That's weird.
I know I'm not super familiar with the exact parental controls. I know you can just restrict apps, so it would be an option to just disable Safari for sure if you didn't want your children accessing anything outside of an app. I know that the parental controls in general are fairly robust. I believe you can block certain sites. I think you can also do a whitelist where you can only access certain sites. I don't know. To the credit of parents who I'd probably don't want to implement a ton of parental controls, I don't know if there are a ton of easy options right now for like following a predefined filter list. Maybe like some sort of organization has already compiled like a bunch of sites to block. I don't know how easy it is to follow a list like that if you only want to block like pornographic websites, for example, on your children's device. That's the sort of area where, like, I know this doesn't exist on all platforms. It might exist on Apple, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't. But even on other platforms, it would be nice if all of these tech companies were developing ways to kind of expand the API for these parental control services so that third-party services might be able to be used like that in a way that the parents define rather than a way that like um these app stores or governments mandate, right?
Yeah, for sure. I do know Molvad's DNS has like a what's the word I'm looking for? An adult content blocker. But I mean, yeah, that requires a fair bit of setup from a lot of people. It's not quite as easy as like an app you download, like NextDNS, for example. I don't know if they have anything like that. So, but yeah, it's very some people in the comments here are saying Windows does have parental controls, but it requires a Microsoft account, of course. Jordan says OISD's not safe for work filter is pretty good for DNS blocking. So, I mean, yeah, DNS blocking is obviously not perfect, and kids are pretty tech savvy. And once they get old enough, they'll probably find ways around that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it is definitely very effective. I feel like DNS, though, is one of those things that you don't know what you don't know. Like, I know I go on this rant a lot, but like, I think we in the privacy community really not overestimate, like, we really take for granted how much we know. I've told this story a few times, not to like throw anybody under the bus, but I sent my sister my website because she's one of my like test audience people, and she looked through it one time and she's like, there's a few words I don't understand. Like, I was asking for feedback, and I was like, all right, hit me, what words? Like I want to make sure I define them. And some of them I kind of understood, like firewall. I'm like, okay, I could see how somebody maybe doesn't really know what that is. But then there were some words like operating system, web browser, and I'm just like, wait a minute, what? Or I think she understood web browser. Or like there were a couple words that I'm like, you don't know what this means. And I don't mean that in a rude way, but I mean that to say like a lot of us, like, yeah, changing your DNS is easy. And it is so easy. But I think the average person off the street, if you ask them about it, they would be like, I don't even know what a DNS is. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where if you don't know what you don't know, then people don't understand to look up, how do I change the DNS on my router? How do I change the DNS on my iPhone? So it's really unfortunate that there isn't that level of literacy. But yeah, I don't know. It's just it's also, ugh, I don't know.
Yeah.
It sucks. But I guess the question I wanted to ask is, how do we think this rates in terms of age verification? Like in a perfect world, it would be nice if we could, whatever the solution is, to that we didn't need age verification, whether that's parents being more involved, parents being better educated, whatever it is. But I mean, I feel like this is a lesser evil than submitting my ID to Persona or Discord or whoever. But I mean, I feel like, what are the drawbacks of this? I mean, aside from, there's always going to be ways around it. What's to stop somebody from lying in their Apple account about their age, or like using their parents' credit card to verify? Like, I wonder if there's any drawbacks to this that I'm not thinking of besides those.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of an ongoing debate on our forum too. I just posted some stuff about this, kind of making some of those points, and I got some replies back disagreeing with me. I was basically saying, like, to me, I think the biggest problem is the whole government mandate side of things, because not only is like this age verification a privacy and security problem, but now you have this censorship element where when the government is deciding like what content requires age verification in the first place, that definitely has a chilling effect on that content. That definitely is a form of government censorship, because some people are going to be prohibited from accessing that content. And we've already seen, especially in the UK, some governments are very overzealous at saying that all sorts of very mundane content, like even Wikipedia, is uh, will require age verification. And I think that that is extremely problematic, and that's the biggest concern that I have with all of this age verification stuff. The other side of this is, to your point, like there are huge security and privacy concerns, like with Persona, for example, or just any service where you're uploading pictures of yourself or your ID, which is even worse, to like some third party service. These data breaches are extremely common. They're already happening, and they're only going to keep happening because that isn't a secure way to validate people's age in the first place. And so that absolutely has to be solved. Solutions like this, uh, they're definitely more private than something like submitting your age to Persona. And I can kind of see both sides of it where like I think some services and websites probably have a legitimate reason to restrict their content to uh only certain age ranges, but I think that that can generally be left up to like the site operator to decide like what should be considered not safe for work or not safe for children, and what shouldn't, or it can be up to parents to define this in their parental controls more likely. um it'll always be a case where like if we have private age verification, um there will be ways around it almost by definition, because uh like one of our moderators on the forum mentioned in this discussion, like a truly private age verification system will not be robust enough to like tell different people who are using a computer apart. So like if a parent wanted, they could verify their own age for their children to get them access to things. So, you know, when it's not an ID based system, there's always that element. I would argue, certainly, which is also what they were arguing on the forum, that like that should be the parents' right to verify their own age if they think that their children should have access to whatever content is behind these paywalls for whatever reason. Because we're not only talking about pornography, for example, we're talking about all sorts of content that's going to be paywalled. But definitely the biggest concern for me is the government deciding what content should be paywalled versus like parents or the content providers themselves. I think that's a totally different question and discussion to have. But it's a huge government overreach problem at the moment, no matter what age verification system gets implemented.
Yeah, for sure. Not to be political, but Jordan said here that they'll probably use age verification to remove LGBTQ plus resources. They absolutely like several red states have explicitly called out LGBT content as stuff that they feel is inappropriate for children. And like you were just saying, I think that's one of the issues I have with this age verification stuff is it removes the agency from the parents to decide I think my child is ready at the appropriate age to have that talk about these topics and stuff like that. So yeah, it's not a fan of that.
And
At
also
all.
like, that issue is kind of prevented if we leave this on the content providers to decide as well as the parents. Because I'm thinking about this. I don't know if I fully believe this, but this is kind of what I was arguing on the forum to see if other people to kind of debate with other people and see what people think. But I was kind of saying that, like, I think a company like Pornhub, for example, I think that they probably have a legitimate reason to want some sort of private age verification system built into the operating system just on their own without any government pressure. I think that, um, like, people working at a company like that probably feel morally like children probably shouldn't be watching that content and they might just want to do that on their own accord. And I think that, if pornographic companies or other services like that feel like their content should be restricted, it would be nice for them to have a very private and secure way to verify that information. But on the other hand, um, I just it's hard to argue for any of this age verification stuff when like any of the parental control solutions make a lot more sense. And I think like if we're thinking about it from the perspective of like companies deciding whether they should do this on their own rather than like the government mandating this, sure, I'm sure some companies won't do it and that'll be a problem and maybe they should be blocked via other means like parental controls. But also like companies who aren't producing content or that are producing helpful content like Wikipedia, for example, or like these LGBTQ resources, like they're not going to implement that. And I think that's a good thing because they can decide and they have experts on their team who know like this content actually isn't harmful and they're the most familiar with it and they can make that decision. So I think like if these tools exist, there could be private and secure ways to do it. But yeah, it just goes back to the whole government mandate thing where it really becomes a problem in my mind because that's not who any of these decisions should be left up to at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. Cause I was thinking while you were talking about like Pornhub, for example, I was kind of thinking like to play devil's advocate, I'm like, well, but here we are in 2026. And as far as I know, websites like that have still never required anything other than checking a little box that says, yes, I promise I'm 18.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, yeah, it would be nice if they had access to these tools. Like, I don't know if tools like this have ever existed before. So I guess that's the one silver lining here is maybe it's nice that now these tools are available for people to take advantage of. But I agree with you that, like, of course, we do not think that they should be forced on people and people should have to use them. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's definitely true that like the there is no way to privately verify somebody's age really. You could argue maybe there is now. People will argue that none of these methods are robust enough, but like yeah, checking a box that says you're over 18 is pretty much the only thing that people can do right now because none of these companies want to collect personal information. That's for sure. Even if they want to have more robust age verification, there was simply no way to do it before. Whereas now, maybe there is, and maybe that would be helpful to them. But it all depends
But
on like how that age is being verified in the first place by the operating system. Because if the operating system or Apple is taking your ID, um, that's still a problem in itself. So
that's actually real quick that I mentioned that at the top and I forgot to circle back to it is I will never stop finding it funny how when the App Store Accountability Act thing came along, the Apple and Google were just like they've been publicly saying like, yeah, we should make the internet safer. We should, keep it safe for kids. No, we don't want the IDs. We don't want that. And I think that's really telling when even the data collection companies, more so Google than Apple, but both of them, when even these companies that collect data are just like, no, that's too much data and we don't want it. Like, we're in favor of this, but we don't want to be responsible for it. And I think that's, yeah, that's really telling. I also, you, last time you were on the show and we talked about this stuff, you really left an impression with me with your argument that, like, I feel like the real solution is regulating social media companies. And I think that's so funny that, and I mean, it's all PR stuff, but like, I remember Facebook a couple years ago was running commercials that, like, we support privacy laws. And it's like, no, you support the privacy laws that you're writing that will basically protect you while you violate all our privacy.
Yeah.
And it's just so disingenuous to see all these big tech companies like, yeah, we need to keep kids safe online. It's like, you're the reason they're not safe online. Yeah, it's crazy.
Kind of related to this, I just saw this comment from Fizzle1 here that we could take a look at. I'm interested in your thoughts on this. They said it's
Oh
completely
boy.
an ideological thing. Do you believe the government should be able to regulate this part of a private citizen's life? Do you think that drugs should be illegal? And I have some thoughts on this. Do you have any immediate thoughts before I get into it?
On whether or not I think drugs should be legal?
Sure.
Um, no, no, you're right. So okay. I think I've said this before. I consider myself a little bit libertarian. I hate to say that because it's
Just a
gotten such a
little.
bad rap. Well, in the sense that, like, it's one of those things that's been twisted by crappy people. But you know, the idea of, like, the government is necessary but should play a very, very minimal role as much as possible. I like that idea. And I think it's such a nuanced thing because, like, I mean, let's use the drugs thing as an example. There are countries where drugs are decriminalized, like even the hardcore drugs, and instead of treating it as a crime, they treat it as like a health thing. Like, they try to make sure that you have access to rehab, you have access to the resources to know where to go get help when you someday wake up and decide I don't want to do this anymore. And I've heard, I'll admit I haven't done like a lot of deep study into it, but I've heard that those countries actually have really lower rates of drug use because people have access, again, to the resources to quit when they want to. And so I think it's really, again, it's like, it's how are you solving the problem? Like, instead of just with these age verification laws, they're just such a heavy-handed. The comparison I keep using is like using a hatchet instead of a scalpel. It's not. These are very complex problems that require nuanced solutions, but politicians like these like easy soundbite answers where they can just go
Yes.
on and be like, "Oh, I passed this law, and now kids are safe." And it's like, well, in the UK they're using VPNs in Death Stranding, and in Australia they're using like, I forget where it was, but I went looking for something a couple weeks ago. I think it was for a blog post, and literally all the results were like how to bypass Australia's age verification with a VPN. And I'm just like, cool, right there with a Google search. Clearly this isn't working. I wasn't using Google, but you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think government should be regulating private people's lives for sure. But it's the point I'm trying to make is I think there's a line between being completely hands off and admitting that there is a problem. And I think, obviously, I think these age verification laws and ID verification laws are overreach and they're heavy handed. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that made sense.
I totally agree, and I'm really glad that you brought up the social media and kind of public health conversation that we had a few weeks ago because that is kind of where I would go with this as well. I do think that, like in general, the government probably has a legitimate interest in like managing public health concerns, and I think that you could certainly classify access to pornography at a young age or um, even getting addicted to that sort of content very similarly to like how these social media algorithms work. I think you could classify that as a big problem, just like you could classify drug use as a big problem. And I don't think that people should just be able to like use any drugs that they want without some sort of intervention taking place. But where I do have a problem with drug laws and also where I have a problem with something like age verification is that um, I think that the government really likes to go after in a lot of countries, like penalizing people who use drugs or people who are in possession of drugs rather than the people who are like distributing this stuff or creating or manufacturing this stuff. And I think that in all of these cases, like mere drug possession should not be illegal or it should be decriminalized because like these are the people who ultimately need help. And similarly, when it comes to age verification, like I don't think it should be illegal for people that access this content, right? Like that is a big problem, and I don't think it should be required for like middlemen like Apple, for example, to get in the way of people accessing this content. But I think that there's certainly like regulations that could be in place that affect like the companies who are producing this content. But it's a matter of like the level of uh personal intervention that's taking place here. And I think that all of this client side stuff, verifying your ID, verifying your age, like that goes too far. And we already have started to see discussions about like making it illegal to use technologies that bypass this age verification. Like they're thinking about making VPNs in the UK illegal, for example. And all of this stuff that really criminalizes access to information and mandates this age verification very robustly. I think that that is all very problematic. And maybe there are ways to prevent that, similarly to like how social media algorithms could be regulated to not be like so addicting, for example, that don't involve all of this intervention in people's private lives. It just is a little crazy, and I think that this is definitely not the best way to go about solving this problem. We're not addressing the root cause. It's literally just a band-aid on the real problems here in society that are and it's just a privacy invasive solution. So all this age verification stuff, yeah, it's doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I don't know that I have much else to add to that story. Do you have any parting thoughts before we move on to the next one?
uh yeah, we'll just have to keep an eye on this, but I think we can move on to the next story here.
Alrighty. Our next story is about open source registries do not have enough money to implement basic security. Do you want to take this one or you want me to
Sure.
recap it? Okay,
Yeah, let me pull this up here.
cool.
This is from the Register. Open source registries don't have enough money to implement basic security. They say open source registries are in financial peril, a co founder of an open source security foundation warned after inspecting their books. And it's not just the bandwidth costs that are killing them. The problem is they don't have enough money to spend on the very security features that we all desperately need to stop being a bunch of idiots and installing programs when they're malware. That's a quote from Michael Windsor, who's a co-founder of Alpha Omega, which is a Linux Foundation project to help secure the open source supply chain. Um, and I think that this is a concerning issue to talk about. We've definitely seen like a growing number of supply chain attacks, for example, especially in like the npm node ecosystem, where there's like so many dependencies on other programs that are in a lot of programs that developers are making these days, and they're not vetting them all, of course, because there's sometimes thousands of them, and any one of those dependencies can introduce some sort of vulnerability, either intentionally or not, into your code base. And there's not much that can really be done about it because exactly like this article says, nobody is really contributing to the financial side of these registries. I think it just this is a broader issue in open source, I think would be my takeaway from this, because at the end of the day, the majority of open source have projects have this problem where they're generally taken for granted, whether it's the software or the infrastructure. Um, but they all have real costs associated with them. And all of the huge tech companies that are taking advantage of these programs or projects are not contributing back in a way that would increase their security or improve them in some ways. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of stuff in this article. Was there anything that really stood out to you when you were reading this?
I think Uh, okay. So I think one thing that I thought was interesting was there's a paragraph here. Bandwidth naturally turned out to be the number one cost at about 25. Hold on. Let me see here. Context. Sorry, real quick. So the person who gave this talk said that they mocked up a Family Feud style game to help attendees guess the 10 biggest expenses for open source registries. Bandwidth was the number one cost at about 25% of total expenses. Storage was 18%, compute was 15%, and battling malware was 12%. New feature development barely registers at 2%, and documentation wasn't even in the top 10, which I do believe sometimes. And also just like the sheer size of these, he estimated it could cost $5 million to $8 million a year to run a major registry the size of crates.io, which gets about $125 billion a year. So this is, I guess,
125
kind of
billion
to say
downloads, just not
downloads.
dollars.
Thank you. Sorry.
Important
Thank you
distinction.
so much. Yeah, that was a slip up for sure. So the I guess the thing I want to say is, yeah, uh this is kind of more like back end stuff. Like I am just now getting to the point in my tech journey where I'm starting to use things like npm and Ruby a little bit more often. And these are the things that even for like end users, like open source, we download Signal, SimpleX, Proton, whatever, like, or even some of the more niche stuff. I'm trying to think of some like more like Briar. Even for those things, like this is the kind of stuff that you don't normally see or think about. This is the stuff that's like way in the background that like the developers building it use this stuff and you never even see it. So this is like way up the supply chain. And I think it's yeah, I really want to back up what you said. Is it really disappoints me that some people have this attitude that like money is just this evil thing when it comes to open source, because like it's unfortunate that, and I mean, I hear you. Like I used to work in a lot of churches when I was in audio video production, and like they still have to pay, and this isn't a defense of churches, but this is just using this as an example. Like they still have to pay the electric bill. They can't pray for the city commissioner not have to pay taxes. Like, oh, I'm not going to pay taxes, but well, I guess churches don't pay taxes, but you know what I mean? It's like these are real costs that people have to pay, and you can't like I can't tell my landlord I'm not going to pay rent today, but I'll show you how to use Signal. Like that's just not how it works. And it's frustrating because I've seen so many people where like, especially the non-essential functionality, like somebody like, say I made, Lord knows we don't need another messaging app, but say I made a messaging app, and say I was like, oh, if you pay for the yearly subscription or even like a one-time license, then that'll unlock like stickers and larger attachment sizes and like things that you don't really need. They're nice little quality of life things. And I've seen some people just like absolutely melt down and be like, oh, this person's a shill, they suck, screw this project, blah blah blah. And it's like, dude, they got to pay the bills. Do you know how much time it took to make this thing? They have to host the bandwidth, they have to host the storage, they like, and it's so frustrating that like the article said, it's so taboo. Here, I think it was at the end, I had it on screen while you were talking, but at the very end, he says money is a rarely discussed aspect of open source. The software is supposed to just be free like beer, right? And they said open source may indeed be free like beer, but no one enjoys a frothy lager served full of chock full of parasites and bacteria. So maybe we should all get used to ponying up at the bar. And it's like, it's true. It's like this stuff takes time and resources. And I do definitely agree with the idea of like information should be free. And I think if you're paywalling the core functionality, like maybe that's not cool, or especially if you're trying to like lock it down and be like, oh, you can't use the source code unless you pay. I mean, I think that's really dicey territory. But just this idea that like, and again, I've seen some where like it's literally donation. It's like they don't even paywall anything. They're like, please donate, and people are like, oh, that's really tacky. And it's like, dude, what the heck? And so yeah, we really need to change this attitude of like expecting everything to be free. And I think it's great that there are so many free resources, but Michael Basil used to really encourage everybody, like, if you have the money, go ahead and pay for a Proton plan or, donate to Signal. It's like, help these tools stick around, because yeah, it's just crazy. So
I think this is a very challenging problem for these open source projects to solve, though, especially because a lot of those costs that you mentioned, like the obvious ones like bandwidth, all of these projects get a ton of donations of like infrastructure bandwidth specifically. I know this article calls out Fastly as donating like content delivery network services to um, at least a few of these ecosystems. And well, donations like that can cover a lot of the bills. Like, I don't think, even though they say that it would cost millions of dollars to run these, I don't think any of these projects are spending millions of dollars a month to host these registries. A lot of those costs are being taken care of, but I think because of that, people don't really recognize neither the companies who are like contributing to this with their infrastructure or the open source developers who are using this or sharing things on it, because all of that bandwidth is completely free. It's very easy to overlook the hidden costs, like this article mentions, like security and malware scanning, for example. That is a real cost, and that can't be easily donated as easy as it is to donate server space or bandwidth for a giant company like Fastly or Cloudflare. That's no problem. But like security takes real time and money, and you actually need donations to do that. And clearly, a donation model isn't enough to for all of these open source registries. But at the same time, I think if any of them switch to a paid model, um, people in the open source community who work on code as a hobby and contribute for free and expect to get other open source code for free in return, they would leave and use something else. I think that possibility was mentioned um, towards the end of this article as well, where they basically said, um, like, if any of these paywall sorts of situations happen where these registries tried to recoup their losses, other entities would spin up their own mirrors or alternatives because again the technical stuff is really easy. It's the security stuff that's hard. And then if the ecosystem is fragmented, rather than like based on these monopolies, uh all of those different mirrors or registries could have their own security problems, and you'll have just it'll probably exacerbate the security issue because now you'll have a ton of different sites who all have varying levels of security, and it'll be very inconsistent across the board. So, what you do about that, I don't know. This could just be a fundamental issue with all of this open source stuff, but I think it's really unfortunate. And I think the only answer is somehow getting these companies who are getting billions of dollars in revenue off on the backs of these projects, like getting them to contribute back, not just with something easy like infrastructure, but with like actual dollars where these projects can kind of allocate those resources as they see fit rather than whatever Fastly decides to donate, right?
Yeah, dollars or I believe I've seen some companies will give I believe I've seen some companies will give like personnel and I don't know how common that is, but I know I've read stories, and I may be getting some of the finer details wrong here, but I've read stories about how like companies like Microsoft and maybe Adobe, somebody with an A, they would basically pay some of their engineers to like, hey, take 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, and like contribute to these open source projects because we use them and we understand the value of these things and we want to give back, which is still not the same as, like you were saying, their ability to hire staff for long-term sustainability, like the project itself, or some of the battling malware, compute, things of that nature. But yeah, it's definitely, because I've seen that too, where you go to a website and it's like, oh, our server space is donated by Hetzner or somebody, and like that's really cool. But yeah, it only goes so far, and it's one of those things where, like, not to sound ungrateful or anything, but I've been in those situations where people are like, oh, I want to donate, like, I mean, like, I'll say it, like right now with the new oil, I've had people who have hit me up and like, hey, is there anything I can do? And I'm like, honestly, not really. Right now, things are so scaled down. I'm like a one person. I'm like, I'm writing blogs, I'm scripting a few videos, but I don't really need other people right now. And, when you have all these companies are like, well, I can donate server space and bandwidth. It's like, well, I only need so much of that. So yeah, it would be nice to, and it's just, yeah, it's such a, you mentioned it's like we don't really have any solutions. He said that in the article, like you mentioned, he was asking the audience kind of like, well, what do we do? And like somebody said ads, which I think we all know how everybody feels about that. And they mentioned maybe charging for things, but then that's when they got into, like you were saying, like, oh well, at that point people will just spin up their own mirrors, but then that creates new problems because then it's like there's still bandwidth issues and there's still like keeping the mirrors updated, and it's just, yeah, it's like it's one of those where like every solution has like a potential problem, and it's really hard to know what the solution is. I know I just mentioned some corporations, but Jordan said here when we started that corporations using and abusing open source once again. Yeah, it would be really nice. Like I've told the story somewhere before that my wife's last car, and probably this car we have now, like my wife's last car, I got in at one time, and for some reason I was just poking around the menu, and I found the section where basically they have to like credit all the open source projects they're using, and it was insanely long. And I just remember thinking, like, how much of the money of my monthly payment is going to any of these projects? And the answer is probably not much, if any, I'm sure. But yeah, it's just crazy that and Jordan also mentioned the meme with like a stack of stuff, and there's that one little thing holding it up. It's a very accurate meme, and it's super unfortunate because open source benefits everybody, but it's hard to make it sustainable. The last thing I'll say is I remember an old episode of the Opt Out podcast. He interviewed somebody that I personally don't know who he is, but I remember the guy he said that he has two separate projects. He has one that does not take any sponsors whatsoever. It's all like donation supported. And then he's got like another project where he does accept sponsors. And he's like, we easily make 10x on the sponsorship one because, and again, I know I kind of called out people that get like super mad, like, oh, you dare ask for money. Nobody's giving money. And I know right now times are hard. Like, I'm not saying everybody needs to run out and go donate right now. Like, the economy's rough, but for people that do have money and get value out of these projects, I personally harp on that a lot, is like, try to find projects you can donate to, or like rotate, this month I'm going to donate to this one. Next month I'm going to donate to that one. And, it's just, but that's probably not a sustainable thing, especially for these like back end registries. It's just, I don't know. I don't have any solutions either, but it's really unfortunate, and I wish there were better solutions.
Yeah, and the person in this article didn't have any answers either, and I certainly don't. It's a problem that I think people need to pay attention to, because we're gonna just continue to see all of these supply chain attacks on the open source software that we like, but what to do about it is a very good question.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this one this week, is just it's a friendly reminder that just everything we've been saying, open source is in a really fragile space and there's no easy answers, but it's something we want to make sure that people are aware of as best we can. So
yeah, absolutely. So we all have more news stories to talk about, but before we get into some announcements from Amazon about how their wish list might suddenly expose your address to anyone who's buying you things, let's give some quick updates about what we've been working on at Privacy Guys this week. Nate, why don't you start us out with what's going on the video side of things?
Sure thing. So we released a few videos this week, I think, if I remember correctly, or
Yes.
maybe it's just what? No. Yeah, we released a couple. Our smartphone privacy and security course is done. I know I've said it multiple times, there were 3 levels plus an introduction video. So beginner, intermediate, and now advanced is out on YouTube for all members. I believe, are both of them out on PeerTube now for members? They should be,
They're
right?
out. Yeah, if you are not a member on YouTube,
Okay.
but you're a member on our site, you would have been emailed. And if you're a member on our forum, you can check the members section there to get access to those videos.
Cool. Yep. So those are out now. Like we just said, we know times are tough. If you do not have any money right now, they will be out probably sometime next week for the general public. But, you are always welcome to sign up for a membership where you get additional perks on the forum and stuff like that. Or if you're like a heavy hardcore YouTube user, you can just sign up on YouTube and you won't get those extra perks, but you will get the videos earlier than everybody else. And that's kind of all that's new on the video side, I think, for now.
Cool. Yeah, very exciting stuff. I think it's either Tuesday or Wednesday. Those will be up to the public. All of our video stuff, we don't restrict it to members. It's always early access because we want as many people to see them. But if you're a member, it's a nice perk. Over on the website side of things, I've been working on some stuff with our staff writer this week, which hopefully we'll be able to announce on next week's show, so I'll have to keep you waiting for that. I won't talk too much about it now. But we have done some other things too. Freya has been putting out a lot of news articles lately. So some news articles that you can find at privacyguides.org/news include Google expanding QuickShare's AirDrop support to the Pixel 9 series, ChatGPT adding lockdown mode for protection against prompt injection attacks, Samsung launching a new privacy display to protect your screen, which I think is pretty cool hardware, and Firefox 148 releasing with the promised AI kill switch feature that I think we talked about. I think it was you and I who talked about that a few weeks ago on this show, if I remember correctly. But yeah, if you are all interested in learning more about that stuff, definitely go check out those news articles. We post news to the site pretty frequently, and I think it's a good place to stay up to date with all of the stuff going on in this space that we don't talk about on the show. If anyone has questions about any of those stories or anything else that they've seen, of course, you can ask in the chat here, and we'll try to get to it during our Q&A section. But yeah, all of the stuff that we do, all of those news articles, running the forum, running the show, all of it is made possible by our supporters. If you want to support us, please consider signing up for a membership on our website or making a one-time donation. You can go to privacyguides.org/donate to do that, or you can pick up some swag at shop.privacyguides.org. Anything else you want to add, Nate?
No, I don't think so.
All right.
One real quick question. Somebody did ask Android or iPhone and privacy. If you're talking about the videos, it's both. We did both of them. Our official recommendation is an Android running Graphene OS. That's like the golden standard for privacy and security. But, you know, sometimes pixels aren't available in certain parts of the world, or maybe you just bought a brand new iPhone before getting into privacy. So whichever one you're on, we do discuss both of them.
Yeah, absolutely. On PeerTube, not on PeerTube yet, but it will be when all of the videos are out to the public. There will be 2 playlists on our channel for either the Android security course or the iPhone security course. If you're on YouTube, those playlists should be available now in the playlist tab for you to find them all. But of course, the last video is still early access for members until next week.
Cool. All righty. I guess I will take our next story talking about Amazon. So this comes from 404 Media, and the headline says, Amazon change means Wishlists might expose your address. So this is a little bit tricky to understand. But basically, a lot of you guys have probably seen this, especially if you're watching this channel. You've probably seen other influencers that, in lieu of like signing up for Patreon or something like that, they may offer like an Amazon wish list, and it could contain, you know, gear that they've been wanting, or even just cool little knickknacks, whatever, all kinds of stuff. So up until now, I guess I don't use Amazon, so I'm just going based on what 404 says. Up until now, you were able to, when you make a wish list and you make it public for like people to buy you stuff, you were able to turn off third-party sellers. And I guess the way that works is when people buy from a first-party seller that goes through Amazon in the official way, a lot of the time they will use, it says here, like UPS, FedEx, and USPS, which does not show your full address as part of package tracking. It will show like your city and state, which is still too much for me personally, but apparently for some people that's good. However, it seems like Amazon is removing this option. We'll remove the option to restrict purchases from third-party sellers for list items. And when this change takes effect, gift purchasers will be able to purchase items sold by third-party sellers, and your delivery address will be shared with the seller for fulfillment. And then basically some of these third-party sellers, depending on their, what's the word I'm looking for? Their policy and how they do business, they might pass along your full address to the purchaser for some reason. I don't know why they would need that, but for some reason. And then even if they don't, the article points out that some of these third-party like delivery services, they require the delivery driver to take a picture to show like proof of delivery, right? And so depending on the picture they take, that might reveal like a street number, a street name, unique geographical features. Like that could reveal all kinds of stuff. So I think And of course, Amazon is saying like, okay, well then you should get a PO box or a non-residential delivery address, which is kind of crappy to like put the onus on people to go spend extra money to protect themselves. Super super weird, but yeah, I think I wanted to share this one mostly just because I know that's a really popular feature that I've seen around online. It's mostly for content creators of all stripes, but yeah, it's super interesting, and I don't know what prompted them to make this change.
I've been thinking about that, and I don't know if there are any legal battles going on right now, but I could imagine maybe third-party sellers are upset about this feature that restricted it to only Amazon purchases because they want to be able to sell things to these people. And so maybe there was something going on there where the third-party sellers were upset about this and Amazon made the change. I think, it's this is not only like information given to the shipping company, but also it's information being given to third party sellers now, not just Amazon. I think a lot of people who use these wish lists, like they trust Amazon with their home address already because they probably use Amazon for their own personal purchases. So keeping that in Amazon is fine. But now expanding this to third party sellers, there's that risk that you mentioned where the third party seller could choose to share it with the buyer. But I can also envision, I don't think this was mentioned in the article, but um I could see somebody who, like, wants to find out your address, they could set themselves up as a third-party seller and set up this product that is on your wish list and then buy it basically from themselves to get that information. I think that that's probably the biggest attack that we would see, with third-party sellers being able to ship items from third-party sellers to people who share these wish lists, and I think that that is legitimately a big concern. So I think it's very unfortunate that Amazon has made this choice. Um, I'm kind of surprised that I haven't seen Amazon suggest using like those Amazon lockers for these. And maybe that's not an option, but I feel like it kind of should be because I feel like Amazon has like an end-to-end delivery service already that doesn't require shipping things directly to your house, and that could be an alternative to a PO box. But it seems like they don't care that much about privacy, which I guess is unsurprising, and they just want you to figure it out for yourself. But yeah, if you do use a wish list on Amazon, you should definitely pay attention to this because it's not just a matter of a third party seller maybe accidentally sharing that information with the buyer. I think there are legitimate attacks that people could use to get your address now if you continue to use these wish lists. So, yeah, huge impact on this. And it is kind of a crazy change for them to make.
That's funny you mentioned the lockers because I completely forgot about the lockers, even though I have so much beef with those lockers. But yeah, that is weird that they wouldn't like say that, like, because that was my first thought is like it's weird that they would roll this out and not use this as an opportunity to be like, oh, by the way, on a totally unrelated note, we're offering our own PO boxes now. And it's
Right.
it's so weird that yeah, they didn't say like, oh, well, you can get it shipped to a locker or something. And yeah, just to be like, sucks to suck, whatever, dude. Um, that is weird. I don't know what prompted this because I mean, usually the answer is money, right? Like, but I guess maybe that's it. Like, I guess maybe by exposing it to third party sellers, maybe they can make more sales. I don't know. That's super weird. But I also don't really know how the wish list thing works. Even before I got into privacy, I was never a huge Amazon. I mean, I'm a minimalist. I don't buy a lot of stuff to begin with. So it's just very, yeah. Yeah, I don't really know how it works with all that stuff, but I guess with that idea of like setting up as a third party seller, is it really that easy to do?
I'm not super familiar with selling things on Amazon, but given how many third-party sellers I see on there, I can't imagine it's that hard. It's probably like a little harder than setting up an eBay account, but probably not a lot harder than setting up an eBay account.
That's fair. Yeah. So, anywho, um,
I think
yeah,
that's
I don't
that.
know if I have much more to add to that. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll move on to the next story here. This was reported by Blood in the Machine. Across the US, people are dismantling and destroying flock surveillance cameras. So I guess it's kind of a feel good story for today. This is a whole newsletter with a lot of different stories in it, basically. And I haven't read the whole thing, but the main story that we saw, they said last week in La Mesa, which is a small city just east of San Diego, California, observers happened upon a pair of destroyed flock cameras. One had been smashed and left on the median, the other had key parts removed. The destruction was obviously intentional and appears perhaps even staged to leave a message. It came just weeks after the city decided, in face of public protest, to continue its contracts with the surveillance company Flock. We've done a lot of stories about Flock on this show. And yeah, there's definitely mixed reactions to this from different cities. We've thankfully been seeing cities cancel their contracts, but we've definitely seen a lot of cities renew them or set up new contracts, and people are rightfully upset about it because it's a huge invasion of privacy and just a way for the government to implement the mass surveillance state. Um, so yeah, it seems like a lot of protests in the San Diego area are going on here against Flock, and that has escalated to sabotage against the equipment itself. But I mean, at the very least, the outrage that people are feeling about this technology is very justified for sure. Um, Yeah, a lot of good pictures here of destroyed equipment just being left on the ground. Was there anything in this article that you wanted to highlight that I didn't mention, Nate?
I don't think so. I mean, I think I hope it goes without saying that we are not advocating for destroying property or anything like that. But yeah, it's also it's really messed up that this is happening specifically in places where people have turned out and very overwhelmingly like turned out in the sense of like gone to like city council meetings and stuff and very explicitly overwhelmingly said we don't want this, and the city was like, well, we're going to do it anyways, which is
Yeah.
to me is like the very antithetical to our system of government here in the US is supposed to be representative. Like, I elect you to represent me, and by going against my wishes is not. And again, the point is it's overwhelming. It's like, obviously my senator does not represent me individually. If I'm being outnumbered, that's a whole different bag of badgers to discuss. But when everybody's coming out and they're like, no, screw this thing, we don't want it, and they're like, oh, what's that, sign the contract? Like, dude, come on. So yeah, that's crazy. I think I'm trying to find it here. There is a link in this article somewhere where they link to NPR, and that is a good link to go read. I think if you just control F NPR, I think it'll turn up. But yeah, that's a good one to read because it talks about how, like you were saying, a lot of other places. One thing worth mentioning real quick is this isn't just in San Diego. They said this has been happening in at least 5 states, including, where was it, like Oregon, Virginia, I think Arizona, Georgia. Anyways, the NPR article talks about how a lot of other places have thankfully been able to get these removed peacefully, but they also go in to talk about a lot of it's a really long article, but it's totally worth the read. And they talk about how people, or not people, like politicians, like a lot of them were basically just not really reading the contract. Like I think they talked about one
unaware of
place.
the problems.
Exactly. Like they talked about one place. I can't remember where it was, but there was one place where they're like, oh yeah, police can access the data. Also, so can the feds. And everybody's like, wait, what? Really? And it's like, yeah, did you not read what this entails? And once this kind of goes back to an argument that I've been making for years, which is I think that most people who don't care about privacy don't understand the depth of it. And that is not me saying go out and scare the hell out of your friends, because scaring people doesn't work. But it's, once they realize like how much data Flock was collecting and who has access to it and how much it's been abused, that's when they start to kind of sit up and they're like, wait a minute, I don't know if I want this after all. And, I feel that a lot of people, I think in my personal opinion, I think a lot of people have that attitude with privacy where they're like, oh yeah, of course, Facebook can, this is an actual conversation I've had. This is back during the Cambridge Analytica scandal. I texted somebody I knew that had an Android, and I'm like, hey, do you have the Facebook app? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, hey, do you know they can read your text messages? And they're like, yeah, Facebook Messenger, of course they can read them. I'm like, no, your SMS messages. That was an actual thing we found out during Cambridge Analytica. And they're like, oh, I did not know that. And I think it's when people understand how much data is being collected, and that's when they kind of sit back and they're like, this is really creepy, and I'm not comfortable with this.
Absolutely.
And then I guess the challenge from there is getting politicians to listen to you and not renew the contract. But that's a different discussion.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that NPR article because I did read that a week ago and it is a very good article. And I don't know if like this vandalism story, I don't know if that has led to any change, but that NPR article definitely shows that like people protesting and people just informing their city government or whatever politicians are involved like of the facts of these situations is actually effective at getting rid of flock in a lot of areas. And I think that protesting this stuff and informing people about the facts are both super important if this is happening in your community because it does make a difference. And I did find that NPR article. I'll send a link to it in the chat here because I'm not sure if we included it in any show notes, but if people are interested in reading that later, I definitely would recommend checking it out because yeah, it's just a good story that like I feel like we're always looking for examples of times where people make a difference in like their communities from a privacy standpoint, and I think that this is a really good example of it. It's unfortunate that this stuff has to happen in the first place. You would hope that politicians would be a bit more competent about this stuff because it is their only job, but what can you do, right?
Yeah, and I get it. Politicians, they're not experts, right? Like nobody's an expert on everything, which is why they're supposed
No.
to consult with experts. But the problem is like, and I know I've said it before, but like Louis Rossman has a really good talk about this where he talks about how he got into right to repair activism. And it's a lot of the time they don't know that the people that they're talking to are salespeople who are lying to them.
Yeah.
And so, when somebody comes in and they're like, oh, it's actually this article, real quick, the link to the NPR article, it's like right above the picture of the pole that got sawed. And it says in some cases they're succeeding. That's the link to the NPR article, but we'll see if we can add it to the newsletter as well. But in this Blood in the Machine article, he links to a video from Ben Jordan, who I will admit, I suck. I've never watched him before. Like I've heard the name. I know he's done a lot of good work, but like I've just been so busy. And I actually made time to watch this video today. He's so funny. He's hysterical. And he keeps quoting how like he's quoting Flock's video that they used to sell to people. And he's like, oh yeah, I bet it doesn't mention the time they like put a family face down on the pavement at gunpoint because their cameras were wrong, or like the time that, I mean, that was the one that stuck out to me, but like he's got multiple instances where it's like this AI was wrong and it like seriously almost got people injured or like traumatized for life. And it's, of course the salespeople don't talk about that when they try to sell it. They just, oh yeah, we're gonna stop crime and we're gonna do all this awesome, cool, noble stuff. And it's like, dude, come on. Like it's where I'm going is, they don't know the other side of it where it's like, yeah, but what's your error rate? Like, how often is this wrong? It doesn't work well on people of color. It's why is it spying on children? How long are you recording the data? Why isn't it secured? Like, they don't know the questions to ask. And that's one of the reasons that I think we need to get more involved in this stuff is.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when I say like it's the politician's only job, I don't mean like it's their only job to know everything about everything, but it is their only job to like be able to suss out who's an expert and who's not, and they are shockingly bad at doing so. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, I agree. You would think they would do more due diligence. Like I know they're busy, but come on, man. Yeah. So it's pretty crazy, but yeah, that is a really good article. It's totally worth reading. So is the NPR article for sure. And the video from Ben Jordan, totally worth a watch. Very funny. So I like him. That's all I have on that story. So I think we do have a couple more really quick mentions here. Let me get this tab pulled up. We're not going to spend too long on these because we don't have too much to add to them. But one of them is 1Password is increasing prices for their annual plan. I wanted to make sure we mentioned this because a couple weeks ago we did talk about Bitwarden increasing their prices. So just wanted to make sure that any 1Password users in the crowd were aware. And we did also get an update. So as a non-European, I don't always get all the news y'all get, but apparently there's like two versions of chat control that are kind of informally called 1.0 and 2.0. 1.0 is basically the like voluntary version, but it still is not good. And 2.0 is the mandatory version. That's like the really oversimplified version of it that I was told. And apparently there is a vote for chat control 1.0 on Monday. And for video viewers or for audio viewers, video viewers can see here there's a little progress bar of like who's for chat control and who's against it. And right now, an overwhelming number of countries in the EU are totally for it. To be clear, this is an extension of Chat Control 1.0. Apparently, Chat Control 1.0 is already in effect.
Yep.
And it's like it was supposed to be a temporary thing, but they keep extending it. Man, could you imagine if a country did that? Cough, cough, the Patriot Act. Anyways, so sarcasm aside, yeah, if you're a European, definitely be aware of that and be on the lookout for that.
Yeah. Sure. For people who aren't familiar with chat control, the current version, which does exist right now in the chat, it in law, it was a temporary measure, like you said, but it basically allows tech companies like Discord, for example, or other tech companies that are providing unencrypted services. It makes it legal for them to scan that content for pretty much whatever they want. They say it's for like scanning for CSAM, for example, but it's pretty much unlimited. But that's the purpose of it, and it was only meant to be temporary. I don't know why it was only meant to be temporary. It's kind of unsurprising that everyone wants to renew it, but I think it's really unfortunate, and we should be pushing back against it. I kind of suspect that it was only temporary because they imagined the mandated everyone, even encrypted messengers, has to scan everything. So right now, the current version of chat controller, like it doesn't require anyone to scan. So of course, something like Signal is safe, whereas the version of chat control that's being proposed in other proposals would endanger privacy tools as well as normal ones. But it is still concerning that the EU is choosing to continue to legalize all of these American tech companies pretty much scanning all of your messages as they see fit. That is still a privacy concern, even if it only takes effect on unencrypted platforms that are doing it voluntarily. It shouldn't be something that people just accept. So hopefully people can speak out against it. But yeah, so it's a tricky problem because it does already exist. And just like the Patriot Act, it's very hard to stop doing that once they have a foothold. Definitely a slippery slope.
Yeah, well said. All right. So in a minute, we're going to start taking viewer questions. So if you've been holding on to any questions, I've definitely seen some in the chat that we are going to circle back to and answer. But if you haven't asked any, go ahead and start leaving them either in the comment section on the live stream, or we do also have a thread over in our forum that you can go ahead and ask questions. But for now, we're going to check in on the community forum, where there's always a lot of activity, but there were a couple that we wanted to go ahead and talk about this week. And the first one is the difference between using an email provider's built-in aliasing feature versus something like Simple Login or Addy.io. Do you have any thoughts on that one, Jonah, or you want me to start?
It's an interesting question. I'm not as familiar with Tuda, but I don't think they have a true aliasing service like Addy, for example, whereas Proton is an interesting thing because they have email aliases that you can add in Proton Mail, and then they also have Proton Pass aliases, and they have Simple Login aliases. The benefit of using a dedicated aliasing service, let's just say you're a Proton user, for example, you could use either Proton Pass or Simple Login, but the nice thing is that there's tooling around these tools that would allow you to automatically generate a new alias for like every website that you sign up with, for example. Whereas if you're just creating an alias in Proton Mail itself or in Tudo, like if you're making a secondary email, maybe there are some benefits to that because in Proton you can make like an @proton.me email, and maybe that'll be more supported by some services than compared to like a Simple Login aliasing service, which occasionally gets blocked. But for the most part, like it's a very manual process. You have to manage all of these things. There aren't like special rules that you can apply to them, or you have to do complicated email filtering. Whereas Simple Login just kind of does all of the aliasing service stuff out of the box. So the main benefit of the aliasing services is just convenience, for sure. You can quickly create and delete these aliases as you need them. And in an ideal world, you would be using a completely different email for every site that you sign up for, just like you should be using a different password because you don't want all of these sites to be able to correlate your activity based on email address. And you also don't want people who are looking through data breaches to be able to correlate your accounts either. So yeah, the email aliasing site or page on our website goes into this in more detail, but I definitely think it's a very useful tool, and I would definitely recommend um, generally using a dedicated tool like Simple Login versus just the like creating an email alias in your email provider or using something like plus aliases. I know people do that a lot, but websites have kind of gotten wind of that and they know to just kind of cancel that out if they want to track you or whatever, because the first part of your email stays the same. So the dedicated services are better.
Yeah, I totally agree. And another thing, in my personal opinion, I think it's well, I mean, for one, it's objectively cheaper. I'm not gonna lie. Like, not to kind of like violate any terms of service, but if you're making a brand new email address in Simple Login or Addy, um, versus making a brand new email address in like Proton, like you have to pay for every additional address over a certain number, unless there's. I don't think they're encrypted, but I know there is. Is it Start Mail that has like unlimited aliases or something? Um, one of those ones. I don't think they're encrypted, so we don't typically recommend them. But I guess if you're using them, that's built in. But the other thing that I like is I feel like, and maybe this applies to like the direct inbox as well, but if you couple this with a custom email or a custom domain, you kind of had unlimited flexibility. Like, say, God forbid, we woke up tomorrow and like Simple Login and Proton both went away. Like the whole company went under. I don't know. They got raided by the Swiss or something, and you had to switch over to somebody else. You just point, excuse me, you just point your custom domain at another provider of your choice, whether that's like Tuda or Mailbox or somebody, and you're mostly uninterrupted service. Which I guess you can make that same argument of using the inbox directly, but I don't know. To me, it also just seems cleaner as well. Cause like, what if this actually happened to me. I'll admit this. I went from one provider to the other, not going to say which one. And I decided I want to use the other one for whatever reason, but I still wanted to keep using Simple Login. And I was able to just like check a box and change all of my aliases immediately over to the other inbox. And like migration took 10 minutes, maybe. It was super, super easy. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's something worth thinking about. So but yeah, I'm with you. I definitely prefer to use the dedicated services instead of the built-in aliasing.
Yeah.
Sure.
I see like in addition to the built-in aliasing, I see a lot of people recommend like a catch-all email with a custom domain. Um, which is fine, but I do like Simple Login being able to automatically generate like a random word for your email instead of you having to think of one. And also, it's nice to be able to like switch off individual aliases if you're getting spam or whatever versus it's just a little trickier when you're using a catch-all that accepts all emails because you can set it up to like only accept emails to aliases that you've already created so people can't just send you random spam by guessing a random email in your catch-all service. So um probably less important for people to do that, but just something to consider. There's a lot of benefits, I think.
Yeah, for sure. That's a big one. I do that a lot too. Like I have an eBay account because I try to avoid using Amazon. And I order something maybe twice a year tops. And so like I'll order it. And then once the item gets here, I'll just turn off the email address. So that way I don't keep getting the follow-up spam of like, oh, we're having a sale. I'm just like, just shut up and go away until the next time I'm ready to order. And yeah, it's amazing. It's awesome.
I'll pull up
Okay.
Fizzle One's comment here just because it's related to this discussion right now. Oh, it's a big comment now. I'm covered up on the screen.
I'll fix that.
Basically, it's talking about using different emails and passwords for each account. What about a recommendation for different phone numbers? And yeah, that is a tricky problem. we've been looking into a while, but there is no like super great solution for the phone number situation because um I mean, phone numbers are a finite resource. It's also the case where like there's a ton of services in the United States, for example, but other countries, people in other countries frequently have problems finding like VoIP services or phone number services that work with their country code. So we don't have a ton of good solutions right now that I can recommend, unfortunately, but it's something that we've been looking into for a while. There's a lot of good suggestions on our forum if you wanted to look into different phone number services that people in our community have used and recommend. Um, and you can try them out and see if they'll work for you. Uh, but I don't know of a best one personally right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't either. The problem is, I mean, first of all, like you said, like outside of the US, the situation is really, really abysmal. But even in the US, you know, it's like it's a scale problem. Like you could get a hold of a handful of phone numbers for relatively cheap, like MySudo, for example. But if you're trying to create an individual phone number for every single account, that is going to get really expensive really fast.
Yeah.
And uh, I will admit, I do want to look into. I remember it was really big when it first came out. That service Cloaked. I didn't look into them when they first came out because at the time I did not have a SIM card, and they require a SIM card to forward everything to. I do have a SIM card now, as much as I don't want to, and so I just haven't gotten it. I also haven't gotten around to it because it's a little bit pricey, and it's one of those things where I'm paying for a lot of crap I don't really want. Like they have a password manager that I know I'm never going to use. They have like some ID protection thing. Like it's just a lot of stuff that I'm like, no, but I just want the phone numbers. Like just give me that. That's what you started with. Give me like the light version pricing that only gives me that. But yeah, I do want to go ahead and like investigate that and try it out. Because I think if you're in the US, I think that might potentially solve a lot of these issues. But it also depends on the usability and it depends on a lot of factors. But
Yeah.
that's not an official endorsement for the record. Like I said, I haven't tried it. I want to try it, but right now that's the only thing I can think of. That's kind of what you're describing.
Well, that'll be interesting if you check that out. It's a bit tricky for me because I have no need for these services personally because I just don't sign up for sites that require a phone number. But I know that people like to use Discord or whatever, and want to be able to verify that, and there should be a good solution, but it's a very tricky problem, and that's part of the reason why like all of these services are relying on phone numbers. I think it's because they know it's not an impossible problem to solve, but it's a challenging problem for most regular people to solve, and that's how they get you. When they can't track you any other way. They know that you'll probably just give them that, unfortunately.
No, I'm with you. I try to use services that don't require a phone number, but every once in a while, man. And yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. All right. And then our other question that I thought would be fun to tackle was why are so many privacy promoting people posting their personal data online? So no offense, but you know, people like you, me, most of our staff, we either use our names or put our faces or some combination of both. So I mean, what are I mean, I guess I threw it to you last time, so I guess it's fair if I go first this time.
I know we're both on video here now, so this is a good example of putting our
Yeah,
faces out
exactly.
there.
That's why I thought it'd be fun to take this one. I actually, full disclosure, you guys, I forgot earlier in the week, we all agreed that Jonah was going to be co-hosting this week because our other regular co-host has other stuff to do. And I completely forgot until like an hour before we started recording. And then I was like, oh, perfect that we picked that topic to talk about. But no, it's so for me, okay, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I started showing my face when I joined a surveillance report, and I did it because at the time I was still. You guys have to understand that I have started and stopped so many projects over the years, mostly because they just kind of never went anywhere, or like I lost the passion for them. Like I've started websites, I've started forums, I've started all kinds of stuff, and it just kind of like after a while I lost interest, and I'm like, yeah, I've got like 5 people reading, so whatever. And so honestly, when I went into privacy, I kind of thought the same thing was going to happen. And so I kind of went into this with the attitude of like, yeah, whatever, I'll do this for a few years. Like, I'll always be into privacy, but like, I'll start this website, I'll get like one person donating, I'll get maybe 100 readers tops, and like whatever. And here I am. So when I started talking to Henry about joining Surveillance Report, and he was like, for the record, he didn't tell me I had to, but he was like, I do show my face. He's like, maybe you could put on like a bandana or something. And I was like, dude, I'll just, whatever. I don't care. I'll just show my face. It's not a big deal. Uh, and here we are. But in retrospect, I will say though, I think I'm kind of glad I did. And I'm not saying everyone should do this by any means, but I think when it comes to being an educator and being a content creator, I think it's really like, if you guys follow the Shorts channel, you've noticed that we've kind of started putting our faces on the clips, and we do like the reaction faces. And to be honest, I don't like doing that just because I don't like the way I look. I don't like my face, but we do it because when people see another person there, it's an emotional connection, and it makes you seem more trustworthy. And so from that perspective, I think I'm kind of glad that I put my face out there, because I hope that it makes it easier for people to connect with the message we're trying to send, and just kind of give that little bit of trust to like get people in the door to hear the message about privacy. I don't know, maybe, I mean, like, there's other people who don't show their faces and their channels are doing great, so maybe that wasn't necessary, but I don't necessarily regret it for that reason.
So you wouldn't do anything different if you could go back and do it again?
I don't know, to be honest.
Yeah,
there's a distinct difference between I don't regret it and I would do it different.
I don't know what I would do either, but I think that last point that you mentioned is important, and that's a sentiment that I saw even other people in our community express in this forum post, which is that, like, certainly some people are going to connect with the message and the education that we're putting out there if they can see a real person and they can put a name to the face about these topics, right? I think it just is more convincing to people, and I think that a lot of people aren't privileged enough to be able to like record a video like this, for example, and get this out there. They can publish content anonymously, or like a lot of text content, but it's harder to do this, and it requires putting more information out there. But I think that this is a good medium to get this information out there and to get people, I guess, interested or informed about these topics in a way that you really just cannot do if you are trying to be completely anonymous yourself, unfortunately. So, yeah, it's tricky. I posted a very long post on the forum in response about this. I'll kind of cover a bit of what I said. Beyond that point of like just being in this privileged position where like I can do this in the first place, whereas a lot of people who need privacy, like minorities or immigrants or victims of abuse or what have you, like they might be privacy experts because they have to be, but they can't exactly publish all of this information on their own and like get other people involved, right? And so it's good that people like us, I think, can do that. But beyond that, in my case, it it's more it more came down to just the fact that I had already been posting a lot of stuff on the internet under my name far before I was working on, well, back then it was privacy tools, now it's privacy guides. But I mean, I've been like being paid by different technology companies to publish blogs and documentation or what have you, under my real name since at least like 2014 or so, which is definitely before I got into privacy. I definitely approached this whole thing from more of the self-hosting techie perspective. That was always what I was into. And then like I got into privacy organically because it became clear that all of these services that I wasn't hosting were very invasive. And it became more clear, especially after like Cambridge Analytica and all of that stuff, like that companies like Facebook and Google were just using all of this data and not for good purposes and for reasons that aren't aligned with their users. And so that's kind of why I got into this from that angle. But I was already publishing stuff under my real name, and so I just continued to do that. So it was just kind of a natural thing, and I think something that I said in my post is that I think a lot of people in a situation like mine kind of approach privacy probably from a similar approach, where they were around for quite a while longer before they got into privacy. People like Naomi Brockwell, I know, does a lot of privacy content now, but I believe they were doing a lot of like cryptocurrency based content and other tech content before she started posting a lot of privacy stuff. I know that Carrie Parker from the Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons podcast, he had like published a book and was doing this podcast. He actually chimed in on the forum thread as well. So if you want to read all of his thoughts, you can check that out. But like he was posting about security and kind of already had a brand, and so when he started posting about privacy, it just was natural to continue using that. And I think that that's kind of the boat that a lot of people are in versus even people on our team, like Freya, who I mentioned earlier, publishing news. I know that they uh, created like this whole identity specifically for privacy guides. And so like I think people who are getting into it now or for people who like are publishing privacy or getting into privacy right off the bat, I think that they tend to um have protected that information better. Whereas the cat was already out of the bag in my in my situation before I was super concerned about privacy. So unfortunately, that was kind of my only option. I didn't really want to start over because I thought if I already have somewhat of a platform, I might as well use it to spread this privacy information. And so it kind of worked out.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that. I think a lot of people confuse privacy and anonymity, and
Yeah.
it's funny. It's funny because one of the podcasts I listen to, the host is very very nice but very chatty woman, and she said on an episode I listened to recently, she's like, "You guys think you know everything about me because," and this wasn't like a privacy podcast, it's totally unrelated, but she's like, "You guys probably think you know everything about me because I'm such an open book, but there's a lot I don't tell you guys." And honestly, that's how I feel about myself because I'm also like very chatty and I'm very much an open book, but there's still a lot I don't share.
Yeah.
And it's, I think a lot of people see us like they see our faces here and they see like names there and they're just like, oh, these guys don't have privacy. And it's like, no, we're still controlling what we share with you guys. And these are things we're choosing to share. And also, I appreciate everyone who always inevitably swoops in and goes, Nate's not his real name, right? He's very open about that. That
Yeah.
always makes me happy. Thank you, guys.
So you're
But
still doing better than me. But yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's very easy for people, I think. All sorts of content creators talk about this where people develop these parasocial relationships. But um yeah, if I really don't want you to know something, it's that's a different situation.
yeah, for sure. And I just want to add on to what you said about privilege. Like, yeah, I don't have any kids. I don't have any like really sensitive things going on where like obviously I do not want to be doxxed or anything, but if it did happen, it wouldn't be the end of the world. Like I wouldn't fear for my kids' safety. My wife's a grown woman. She can handle herself. We're both born and raised in the US. We're not in any kind of sensitive situation where it's like, oh, this could get really bad, really any worse than it would for anyone else. And so it's kind of having that privilege of like, again, not to be too political, but like I've heard it compared to some people where like I've heard some people say like, oh, I live in a red state, but I have a pride flag in my yard because I live alone. I don't care. Come after me. If I had loved ones, I probably wouldn't be so bold. And so to me, it's kind of that, like, not the come after me part, please don't. But you know what I mean? It's like, I have less to lose. And that makes me a little bit bolder to be like, oh, maybe I'll be a little bit more open, like you were saying, as opposed to somebody who's like, probably could run circles around me, but they're like, I can't come forward because I can't risk it. And yeah, so I don't know. I think that's all I had on that one. So I guess we'll roll into some questions here. Unfortunately, we did not get any questions on our forum post this week. We kind of haven't been for the last couple weeks, I think, but
I think
it
it's
is
good that
nice
we have
that
the StreamYard chat now. I think a lot of people have moved there, so a lot of
yeah,
chat
I was about to
today.
say the chat is super active, which I am so here for, and I'm so happy. I went back a little bit. This was one we kind of blew past, but I think it's pretty cool. Fizzle asked, what do we think about the lack of privacy projects that accept Monero? And if privacy projects won't accept it, how can we expect regular companies to ever accept crypto? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is it is tricky, but I do think Monero has made pretty good inroads in a lot of respects here. I can't think of a lot of projects that accept cryptocurrency but don't accept Monero. I mean, there are a few, but typically, especially privacy projects, they will accept both. Whereas the ones that don't accept Monero don't use cryptocurrency at all, which I think is a totally separate issue to solve, right? If you're already accepting cryptocurrency, adding on Monero, I think is not a huge challenge for a lot of these organizations, and I think they can consider it. Whereas like getting an organization to adopt cryptocurrency when they don't accept anything at all is challenging. But there are so many tools that are built into like BTC Pay Server or whatever other merchant tools that people are using where you can accept Monero. And I mean, you can even, if you're a business, you can convert it instantly to whatever cryptocurrency or to USD that you want. So uh, there shouldn't really be much stopping people from accepting it. But yeah, if you know of any like specific examples, I'd be interested to know what you run into. But I think that that's the main differentiator that I see. But it feels to me, just based on looking at like the whole privacy ecosystem, it seems to be one of the more popular cryptocurrencies to accept. Certainly. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I was gonna say I agree. I most of the projects I see either like don't accept any crypto or they accept like Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Monero, Ethereum, Litecoin, like Zcash. Occasionally I'll see some that's like just Bitcoin or something, but it's pretty rare, especially in the privacy community specifically.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, I would say probably overall adoption. I think probably the big thing holding it back would be support, in the sense that like I can hop on Coinbase, crypto.com, any of these mainstream cryptocurrencies, FTX doesn't exist anymore. Whatever replaced FTX, I can hop on any of them and I can buy Bitcoin, right? And I can cash it out. Getting Monero is kind of a chore, to be totally honest.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to do like, I guess you made a really good point about like, you can do conversions, right? Like you could always buy Bitcoin and convert it to Monero in several different ways. And so I think, I guess that kind of destroys my argument, but that was just kind of my thought, is like, maybe it's a little bit less adopted because it's just kind of harder to deal with.
In some respects, it is. I mean, I will say the like swapping is challenging for some people, and you have to like find a trustworthy service. Like it's not as, I mean, no cryptocurrency stuff is super regulated, but something like Coinbase is a bit more trustworthy than like a lot of these random swap services, like the decentralized ones. So yeah, to their credit, like the swap services are more annoying than exchanges, and they can be more expensive. I mean, there can be significant fees on them, but that is typically how we recommend getting Monero, is swapping like Bitcoin for it. So I don't think it's super challenging either. Anyways.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of what I was thinking when you were saying that. I'm like, well, I guess if you know enough to accept Monero, you probably know how to swap it too. So, but I do think I stand by what I said, in the sense that like, I think if it was easier to on what do they call that? On ramping and off ramping. I think that would definitely increase adoption, but
for sure.
Yeah.
The same commenter left a follow-up saying that Proton is a big one that isn't accepted. That's true. I know for sure that the people at Proton are big Bitcoin purists and just hate all other cryptocurrencies, like illogically, in my opinion. So that is an interesting case there. If you're like a Bitcoin maxi, I guess you wouldn't accept Monero, but that's not a logical position, in my opinion, personally.
Yeah, I was really disappointed that Proton doesn't support Monero in so many ways. Yeah. That same person, just kind of going through older questions, they asked me what's my beef with the Amazon lockers. My beef is that they used to be code-based, so you could like, it would say like, oh, your package is here, here's your code to unlock it, or here's your barcode. And you could print that out, go to the locker, get your package, and go. And the last time I used one, granted, this was like 2 years ago, so it's probably even worse now. But the last time I used one, it was like, no, you have to check in on your phone. So I'm literally standing in front of this stupid department store because I couldn't get onto their Wi-Fi for some reason, trying to download their crappy app, trying to give it permission to Bluetooth. just all this like huge headache that I'm sure for an average person that like downloads every app compulsively, and not to be rude to average listeners, but like compulsively downloads every app and leaves Bluetooth on all the time. I'm sure it's just like, oh, walk in, check in, blah. But I'm like literally standing in this parking lot, like, is it done yet? Is it done? And it was such an infuriating experience. And I was actually on my way to go somewhere. I was just like, oh, I'll swing by and pick this up real quick. And it was just such an awful experience. So yeah, I'm like jaded now, and I hate the Amazon lockers.
I'll pull up this question, even though
Um,
it's comment. I guess it's not really a question, but
yeah.
someone just said they rewatched my video about using VPNs with Tor. Thanks. I also like that video. It's it's funny. I just wanted to bring up this comment because something happened to me recently where I went to like a sort of a tech related thing, and people and somebody came up to me and they were like, this was like hours into it. Like we had already talked before, and then they came back and they were like, I actually have known you the whole time because I've seen this video and I unsubscribed from Mental Outlaw because of it. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. It's it's broken out into the real world. People are watching it. I'm never used to that. People watching my videos. It's crazy, but I'm glad you got something out of it.
Yeah, I've had that happen a couple times in real life where people will come up to me and they're like, "You're Nate," and I'm just like, "What?"
Yeah, it's a little
Yeah, that's
weird.
wild. It's so weird. Like, it's great. I appreciate it, but it's also just kind of like what's happening right now. Also kind of off topic, but I do want to that same person, when I said I'm a minimalist, he's like, look at all this stuff behind you. I want to defend minimalism because minimalism is not about having the fewest things. It's about being intentional with the things that you bring into your life. I have read every one of those books, and to be fair, I don't mess with the Pine phone too much. But I try to every few months. Every few months I circle back to it and I'm like, how is this thing doing? So yeah, I just wanted to defend myself real quick and like, no, of course I have things. I have a watch, but it's, it's about being intentional. So yeah. Oh, here's a good one. What do we think about iOS and the Apple ecosystem as a privacy stack for someone with a threat model of escaping surveillance capitalism? And just for context, they said, in other words, is a Graphene OS device really the end all be all for decent privacy?
I mean, yeah, to me, iOS is certainly like one of the best options out of the whole mobile phone ecosystem, but I'm not a huge fan of mobile phones in general. Overall, I think that all of them are kind of privacy nightmares and they're all going to contribute to this problem. I almost think of this as like iOS is kind of a good ecosystem and privacy stack for someone who like wants to exist in the surveillance capitalism world as privately as possible, which I think is a lot of people because a lot of people don't want to give up a lot of social networks, like even Instagram, for example. And it's like, okay, you can make some incremental improvements by switching to an iPhone. You're going to have much better security. You're going to have better permission controls generally, so you can control kind of what these apps are accessing. But like, it's a very good platform for using these invasive apps, and the apps are still going to be very invasive, unfortunately. So like within the surveillance capitalism society that we live in, I think it's a good choice. But like if you want to completely remove yourself from all of that stuff, I don't know if it's the ideal platform. I don't think any mobile phone really is. Because even Graphene OS, for example, you can certainly use it without Google services, and that's fine. And that it is definitely like the best possible option for the mobile ecosystem if you use a phone with Graphene OS without Google Play services. But if you're gonna load up Google Play services, even with their sandbox solution, which is certainly far more private, I mean, far more secure than a typical Android phone, it doesn't really have massive privacy benefits. All of these apps are still interacting with like Google Play, and you're still getting your apps from Google Play, and all of these services are working. And that's kind of the intent of it, is for people who like want more security, but also don't care enough about privacy or can't for whatever reason switch away from the Google ecosystem. But it's just the most secure way to use the Google ecosystem if you have that installed, and that is still a privacy problem. And so I love that Graphene OS like gives you the option to not do that. But uh, yeah, if you use Graphene OS with Google Play services and you use all of these apps, I honestly I do think you're worse off from a privacy perspective, just from that angle compared to iOS. Not much worse off, but I just can't justify using Google Play services for any of this stuff. But yeah, Graphene OS without Google Play services, that's probably the only real option if you want to completely escape all of this stuff. Or don't use a phone at all because they're not great for privacy, unfortunately. But that's a big ask for a lot of people, so I understand why people wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I agree. I think Apple is better in the sense that they don't rely on targeted ads, and they do. I mean, I will accept the argument that it's probably just privacy washing, but they do still introduce a lot of really innovative privacy features, really cool privacy features. Some of them not so innovative because they steal them from graphene, but that's beside the point. But yeah, it's. I mean, I think if you're just trying to escape surveillance capitalism, I think it's. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like if your threat model is just surveillance capitalism, I think there's so many things you can do regardless of what phone you're on. I mean, things like switching your browser off of Chrome, because like everybody uses Chrome, right? Like switching off that, switching off Gmail, switching like just it's all about like the way it all builds on top of each other.
Yes.
And I mean, like you were saying, like you can switch to graphene, and if you immediately re-download all those apps, like you haven't really fixed much. Like you'll get a little bit of boost, but not that much. And yeah, so it's there's still a lot you can do on an iPhone, I think.
No, it definitely, I mean, you're right, it all adds up together. And like when these companies or data brokers or whoever can interconnect all of that data, that is a larger privacy concern. But I think in the mobile phone ecosystem in general, you frequently have like even just cell phone carriers selling your location data, and they get that inherently from like the towers. We talked a bit about this when we talked about Freely like a month or so ago. It's like, yeah, they're just inherently not private solutions. But when you have that happening on your phone, and then you have like Google Chrome web browser tracking all of your browsing history, and then you have like Facebook and Instagram installed, and you're using these social media platforms and you're posting all sorts of content to that. Like all of that adds up. And if you can eliminate some of those things, you're in a much better position than not doing any of that. So switching to an iPhone, or even better, switching to Graphene OS, it's an improvement for sure, but you're not like totally escaping all of this. Even on Graphene OS, they can't do much about like the modem firmware on your phone, like basically running its own operating system that does whatever the cell phone towers want it to do. So like there's just inherent privacy problems with all of these technologies at some level, but you got to do what you can, I think. So they are good options to switch to if you're not using them already.
Yeah, for sure. I think we got one more from Fizzle. So I just got a YubiKey and I didn't realize you're supposed to get two. You said, is there any way a service can tell it's the same user if you use the key again? I guess we'll take these one at a time. If you're talking about like registering it twice, I don't think you can do that. Like it knows that you're the same user with both keys.
Yeah, I don't
Or
understand this question exactly. Are you wondering if you can use two keys with one service? Because you can definitely do that.
Yeah.
Like you just register them both.
Not with PayPal.
Okay,
I freaking hate PayPal.
that is unfortunate.
They're the only ones I've ever seen do that, though. For the record, everybody else, yeah, you can do it. Sorry, go ahead.
They just commented like for a different account. If you're using the key for a different account on the same site, you typically can't do that because it can only store one per site. Like it identifies it based on the domain name for the key, basically. So you can't store like multiple accounts on the same key. If you use a different physical key, you can obviously use two different accounts because they're two separate keys. But you can't use. But you're supposed to get a second key to have a backup in case you lose one or whatever. Otherwise, you can be locked out. So it is best practice to like have 2 keys and set them both up on your accounts if you want to be safe. Um, in theory,
No,
sorry,
I'm
yeah,
pretty sure
what are you
you can
thinking?
use multiple accounts on one key because I do that on Mastodon.
Maybe for two-factor authentication,
Yeah,
that could be true. Um,
I don't know if it's true
but
across the board, but I do it on Mastodon, and I think there's a couple other services too. I think Google.
maybe I'm just
Yeah,
thinking of
I have multiple
passkeys
Google
then.
accounts on the same YubiKey. Huh.
Oh, I think I do too. No, I think that is correct. I might just be thinking of passkeys which store your username.
That might be true because I save my
Your
passkeys in
password was.
Bitwarden. I don't use the YubiKey for that. Sorry.
Uh, so so yeah, for two-factor authentication, the protocol that's used for that, it is supposed to be privacy respecting. There is um there is a way for websites to access like the serial number and other information from your key. But what it'll do in Firefox is it'll prompt you and it'll say like this website wants extra information about your key. And if you grant that, it could maybe correlate that stuff. But if you don't do that, then there should be no correlation. So, and that's very rare to see. So you typically shouldn't run into that problem. But yeah, just keep an eye out for that pop up.
And then additional questions. Should you turn off email and authenticator as 2FA methods in Bitwarden if you have a security key? Does leaving email and authenticator app negate the benefits? I think I wouldn't, simply because you only have one key, and that would be really bad to lose access. That said, you are only as secure as your weakest link, which in this case I would argue is probably email.
Yeah.
So personally, I would leave TOTP on as a backup until you're able to get a second YubiKey or like a second hardware key of some kind. But yeah, that is something to keep in mind. If you've got, just hypothetically, if you've got every single 2FA method turned on an account, it only takes one of them to like get your two-factor SMS code phished, and yeah. So.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely comes down to like the security of your authenticator app. I would typically, in a lot of cases, use both a security key and an authenticator app because I think they're both relatively secure. Just from a like an entropy perspective, like it's a random secret, not like a password, so it's going to be different for every website, and you didn't come up with it. There's nothing to memorize, so like it's decent security. The main benefit, in my opinion, there's other benefits, but the main thing is that with a security key, you can't be phished. Uh, so there's no risk of like a fake Bitwarden site tricking you into authenticating because it, like I said before, it's domain based and they can't do that. Whereas they can take your TOTP code if you enter it in. So I usually leave TOTP on as like a backup 2FA solution and I keep those codes secured. But then like whenever I run into a site asking for a TOTP code instead of a security key, I'm like, oh, alarm bells are going off in my head. That's a big red flag that maybe like a phishing attack is happening right now. And so like if you're just aware of that and like every time that you see a TOTP entry page, you're gonna be like hyper aware of a potential attack going on, and you can use that as like a huge red flag. Then it's probably fine as long as you're keeping those codes relatively secure. Um, of course, like the other benefit of a security key is you can't access the secret in the first place. So like there's no risk of you accidentally leaking it. And if you're concerned about that, then that is a huge benefit. That might make you want to reconsider using a TOTP code. But if you're not super concerned about that possibility, um, I would say it's probably fine to use both.
Yeah, I was gonna say that'd be my biggest concern, is if you're one of those people who's storing like the 2FA seeds in Bitwarden alongside your passwords, or like recovery keys in the note section. Like, yeah, that creates a single point of failure. So you probably want to be extra cautious at that point. But if you're decentralizing your 2FA, then it's probably not as big a deal. TOTP is pretty secure, I would agree, for most people.
Mm-hmm.
We did have a comment I just wanted to agree with. You said your favorite thing of switching to graphene from iOS was that you can get pretty much all of the apps you use as open source. I agree. Like, even if Android custom OSs went away tomorrow, I would probably still use Android, to be totally honest, just because at this point I'm all in on like setting up Nextcloud is easier, using AntennaPod. Like, I just feel like it's a better ecosystem if you're an open source fan, but that's personal
Absolutely.
opinion. Yeah.
No, I mean that's totally true. And especially like if you can get away with only using F-Droid apps, for example, on Graphene OS. And if you can really like get rid of Google Play services. Another nice thing about Graphene OS is that if you want, like you can restrict Google Play services to only a specific profile. So there's also that element where you could have F-Droid in like the main profile without Google Play services and you get a lot of benefits, but you have the option to switch. It's almost like dual booting your computer between Windows or Linux or something. I've never been like a dual booting fan personally when it comes to computers. So also the Graphene OS profiles are challenging for me, but for some people that really works, and that could be a good way to use it. But yeah,
well, I've heard now. I was just gonna say I've heard now with the what do they call that, like the secure profile or whatever, the Android rolled out like with Android 16.
Yeah, the secure. Oh, on Samsung,
You
it's
know what I'm
called
talking
like
about.
secure folder. They've had it a while. I don't remember what Google calls it on the Pixel. Private
But
space.
either way, I've heard now
private space.
since they've rolled that out. Yeah, that's it. Private space. Yes, thank
someone
you.
else said that too. Yeah.
Now that they've rolled that out, I've heard that you can even install the Google services in that. And so it's almost like a better version of the work profile
That's
thing,
true.
Shelter.
It should be. I mean, I think it functions exactly the same as the work profile, and I do know you can do that on work profiles on Graphene OS now. So I would imagine that's true, and that would be a really nice way to do it. So
yeah,
something to consider if you're a Graphene
really
user.
Convenient. I will also say, as a longtime dual booter, the only reason I really like dual booting is because then it's just one less computer to carry around. But other than that, I agree with you. It's right now I have two computers, and it is really nice to just like Windows is here and I'm doing my video editing, and then Cubes is here and I could just like reply to whatever. That is really nice.
Yeah, I'm definitely more of a two computer person, but I realize most people probably can't do that.
I mean, like I said, when you're traveling, it sucks, but yeah. And then I guess real quick, we got one last question. This person uses PayPal and Klarna so that they don't have to use debit card details since crypto is not universally accepted. How do we feel about that from a privacy perspective?
I'm not familiar with what PayPal shares with merchants off the top of my head, so I would wonder about that. I don't think it's like as private as something like virtual card numbers, for example. Or
like Apple Pay or something.
But I'm actually not totally sure off the top of my head. The obvious like the counterpoint to this is it really depends on like what you're concerned about, because yeah, if I'd have to do more research into PayPal to see if they do like truly separate this data so like merchants can't correlate your data. I'm not saying they do that, but they might. But even if they do that, like you're still giving all of your purchase history to PayPal themselves basically. And PayPal is probably not the most trustworthy tech company that I would entrust all of that information to. It's just like another layer that's collecting all of your transaction data on top of your bank, which may or may not already be not the ideal privacy situation. So yeah, so it's tricky. I would say from a security perspective, I would probably use something like PayPal if I was like a debit card only type of person, just since you mentioned debit cards, because debit card security is not fantastic. But since I am a big credit card user, I prefer to just use my credit card on sites rather than going through another like third party solution like PayPal personally.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought. Is I could see this as more of a security thing, kind of like using Apple Pay in the first place, because then you're getting, well, I guess Apple Pay also offers a little bit more privacy than a debit card potentially, but it's a way to avoid getting like your card number stolen or something potentially. But yeah, I can't imagine PayPal is the most private, if nothing else, for the reason you said, that it's sharing all your transaction history with them. So
yeah, and again, I'm really not sure what information PayPal like shares with merchants and if that can be used to track you. But if you want to know the answer and you want to remind me, you could always ask on our forum, and then I'll look into it and post a reply later because I'm kind of curious, but I might not do that if no one asks.
Mood. Okay, that was all our questions this week. So all the updates from this episode will be shared on the blog every week. So every episode, not just this one, will be shared on the blog every week. So sign up for the newsletter or subscribe in your favorite RSS reader if you want to stay tuned. And as a bonus, I think I've mentioned this a couple times, we've actually started sending the newsletter out right when the episode starts. So that also acts as a really good reminder that like, hey, the episode's starting, let me tune in. And there's a link right in there at the top that you can click and watch us on StreamYard. Go right there. So for people who prefer audio, we have a podcast available on all podcast platforms and also RSS. And this video will be synced to PeerTube at a later time. Privacy Guides is an impartial nonprofit organization that is focused on building a strong privacy advocacy community and delivering the best digital privacy and consumer technology rights advice on the internet. If you want to support our mission, you can make a donation on our website, privacyguides.org. To make a donation, click the red heart icon located in the top right corner of the page. You can contribute using standard fiat currency via debit or credit card, or you can donate anonymously using Monero, like we talked about, or your favorite cryptocurrency. Becoming a member unlocks exclusive perks like early access to video content and priority during the This Week in Privacy livestream Q&A. You'll also get a cool badge on your profile in the forum and the warm, fuzzy feeling of supporting independent media. Thank you guys so much for watching and being active in the chat this week, and we will see you next week.